Hey guys, how's it going? I think we are living in a completely bizarre universe, right? Everything is turned upside down. And I'm talking about the latest news of the iPhone SE. So if you haven't checked out the news, basically Apple has come out with a sequel to their old iPhone SE, which was launched in 2016. And the reason I'm so excited, and by the way, I'm not an iPhone fan. I actually have never owned an iPhone. My son has an iPhone, but I have always been an Android guy. So this is something which usually I don't care much about what Apple launches, but I'm so surprised by this news. And the main reason is that iPhone SE, which is basically an upgrade to iPhone 8, it's basically an iPhone 8, the same body, the same home button, the same thick bezels, the chin and the forehead, all those things are still there. But the difference is that they have put the internals of the phone. It's now sporting a very fast the Bionic chip, the whatever A13 or whatever Apple calls it. It's the fastest SoC we have in the market, and it will smoke anything which Snapdragon is making. And it also has the camera internals from the latest iPhone. It just has one lens camera, but the optics is really good. And the reason I'm so surprised, and I'm actually impressed by Apple, you have to give them kudos for doing this, because take a look at the $399 phone market, right? You have Google Pixel 3a and the 4a will be coming, and that phone, yes, it has a good camera, a good photo camera. I would say the video capabilities of Pixel is not that good, at least not at par with Apple, but as far as the photos are concerned, you get a really good camera. So that also goes for $399, but they put a mid-tier Snapdragon processor in those phones, and that Bionic A13 Bionic chip which Apple has put in the the iPhone SE, that will run circles around even the top tier Snapdragon phone, the top tier Snapdragon processors. So I mean, just forget about whatever Google Pixel is going to put in their mid tier. It's embarrassing. It's not a contest. It's no contest. It's really pathetic. And OnePlus came out with a $900 phone. So we are now living in a bizarre world where one phone, the phone which was supposed to be a flagship killer, that is now $900. And then you have Apple releasing a brand new phone for $400. Unbelievable, right? A few years back, somebody had told me that Apple would be releasing a brand new $400 phone with a flagship SoC and flagship camera features, and then you will have an Android manufacturer releasing a $900 phone. I would not have believed it, but yeah, that's what is happening. So it's an upside down world. I think my hope is that the Android people will take a look at this phone, and they will have some sense, and they will start coming out with better options, because honestly, even as an Android fanboy, I have owned mostly Samsung phones, and I do like Samsung phones. Currently I have a Galaxy S8, so that's like 2-3 generation old now, and I have not upgraded. The reason I have not upgraded is because it is looking ridiculous in terms of the price. The new S20 is like, I mean, $1,500. God, I mean, that is just stupid. So some sense needs to prevail. There are no good mid-tier phones with flagship specs. So Pixel is the only option right now if you are in the US market. I know in India and China you have other options, but out here in North America, Google Pixel 3a and now the Google Pixel 4a, those are your only options, and it's not a very good option. Yeah, sure, you get a good camera, but the video features are not that good. And this camera, the Apple iPhone SE, this will shoot 4K 60 frames per second. 4K 60 frames per second. Think about it. That's like more than what you want. And even a lot of the flagship Android phones have, until recently, they could not support this. So this is really truly upside down world. Apple has become the brand which is now price conscious. Folks will, I would recommend them. Like if somebody comes and asks me, hey, I want to buy a budget phone, and what phone would you recommend? I will now just say, yeah, go get an iPhone SE. If you are on a tight budget, that's the phone to buy now. It's a no-brainer. You are getting the Apple ecosystem, so all the apps and all the the OS updates. iPhone will usually give you updates for many years down the line. Your phone will not get abandoned a year or two after you buy them, unlike a lot of Android phones. So at least Samsung has become better in this. Even my Galaxy S8, I bought it in 2017, and it is still getting security updates, monthly security updates on time. So Samsung has definitely upped their game, but there are many other phones like the LG phone, and I used to have a couple of LG phones that I had purchased, and they were like completely abandoned by LG after like a year or two. And that was and the same thing with some of the other lower tier Android phones. So you could argue that, hey, it's a cheap phone, so what do you expect? But now if Apple is going to make a $400 phone, and if it's going to give you these flagship specs, and it's going to give you these software updates and features, a flagship camera, a CPU which is so fast that it will run circles around the fastest Android phone that you can buy for twice the price, right? So what does that mean? That means if you are into gaming, if you want to play your favorite games, they will run better on your $400 iPhone than your $900 OnePlus 8 Pro, which is just ridiculous, right? So as an Android fan, I am actually little upset. I'm upset at the state of the Android phone that is in North America, and this needs to change. I think in North America this is a day of reckoning, and the phone makers, you guys get your shit together. I will say Samsung and the others, if you guys want to compete, LG is still around, so if you want to compete, get your shit together, okay? Stop making $1,500 phones. Nobody's going to buy them, and look at Samsung, they are struggling, nobody's buying their phone. The Galaxy S20, from what I have read, I mean, of course the whole world is right now in the middle of a global pandemic, so yeah, that's unfortunate. But even if this had not happened, Galaxy S20 was because of the price, it was always going to struggle. And Samsung has to focus on their mid-tier phones. And when I say mid-tier, you still need to put something which you can't put a mid-tier Snapdragon processor which has really rubbish performance. That's not going to cut it. So put a good CPU, put a good SoC which has good CPU and GPU performance, and the camera features need to be good. So in 2020, I think you cannot release a phone, whether it's a mid-tier phone or a high-end phone, if the camera performance is not good, it just disqualifies that phone right away. And that excuse is not going to fly, that hey, I am making a $399 phone, what do you expect, the camera is going to be mediocre. I don't think that will work now. When you look at what iPhone is doing, and even Google Pixel, they can give you flagship phone, they can give you flagship camera at this price point. There is no excuse for Samsung and other companies to come out with phones for the $400 price phone which has absolute rubbish camera. So yeah guys, I mean, it's funny, right? It's an upside down world, right? For me as an Android fanboy, I am kind of bummed. I'm like, why is there no choice in the Android world? Like what Apple is offering for $399, you are getting a phone with flagship processor, flagship GPU, and a flagship camera, right, for $400. Okay, there are a lot of other things which are missing. The screen is not 120 hertz refresh rate. The screen doesn't have insane resolution. You have thick bezels. So all those things are, yes, they are not present. So at the end of the day, what are the important things for a camera, right? I think the most important thing is the performance, then the battery life, the gaming performance, and the camera, right? If you get these things right, then yeah, sure, the aesthetics, the screen quality, 120 hertz refresh, your bezel, how thick your bezels are, those are nice to have features. But I am willing to compromise on those things if the first 4 items which I mentioned, performance, battery life, gaming performance, and camera, if you can get these right, you have a winner. And I think Apple has done that. So in my book, Apple has released a winner. This phone, I think it's going to sell like hotcakes. And of course, the global pandemic situation, I don't know how that will affect the sale of the phone in India and China. Nobody knows that. But this is a step in the right direction. And I want Samsung, I want OnePlus, I want all these other companies, the Android phone makers, you guys need to get your shit together. Start making good phones at a budget price. $1,500 phone is bullshit. Okay, I'm not going to buy a $1,500 phone, not because I cannot afford it. I'm just not going to buy it. I mean, it's a waste of money. Even if I have the money to buy it, I'm not going to buy it. This is like ridiculous. Why the hell would I pay $1,500 for a phone? So that is a ridiculous price. You can keep that as an aspirational phone for some people who want to show off and get that phone, fine, but you need to have a phone for normal folks at a decent price. But don't skimp on the performance. Don't put a shitty Snapdragon mid-tier processor with rubbish performance and and a camera which is like nonsense. If Apple can do this, like the company which is associated with a brand, which just for that brand, just for that Apple, they charge so much money, right? Apple is able to charge ridiculous price for their laptops, for their phones. Historically, that's what the argument was, that Apple would charge so much money just because of the Apple logo. Now here is the same company which is giving you a product for the masses, right? This is a phone for the masses. It has everything which a normal person would need, and they are giving this phone for only $400. Now if Apple can do this, why can't other companies do the same thing? Why can't Google come out with a phone with a kick-ass processor inside it instead of putting whatever mid-tier Snapdragon processor they put in their Pixel 3a and 4a phones? Put a Snapdragon, whatever is the fastest, or make one yourself, right? That's the other thing which I really find very irritating, right? There was a time when you had many manufacturers. You had obviously Qualcomm was there, but then you had Texas Instrument, which was making a SoC. Intel was trying to make SoC. Nvidia was making SoCs. There was competition, but because of abusive monopoly, mostly from Snapdragon, from Qualcomm, most of the other people threw in the towel and they left. Even Intel threw the towel. Even Intel was like, what, we don't want to do this anymore. And so nobody is left now. It's only Qualcomm. And as a result, look at the improvements Qualcomm has done in their Snapdragon line of processors. It's not improving at all. And the reason why Snapdragon is sucking is because there is no competition in the Android world. If there is nobody who's going to challenge Snapdragon, this is what you will get. Even Samsung, which was making their own Exynos line of SoCs, even they have started sucking. So I think the latest, I was reading this article where the Samsung team, the SoC team responsible for making these Exynos line of CPUs, they were being like dressed down by the management. He's like, what the hell is up with you guys? Why is your SoC so far behind Snapdragon? So yeah, I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. Apple is way ahead, right? They also started, if you look at the history of Apple SoCs, right? When they started making their own processors, they also took the same ARM spec, the same ARM architecture, and then they refined the hell out of it. And now here we are. They have a processor which is way better than anything out there. In fact, the latest rumors are that they might be putting the SoC that they are developing, the same iPhone chip which is also in your iPad, they might put it in the Mac Air or in one of the consumer MacBooks. Not the Pro model. The Pro model will continue to run Intel, but the Mac Air line and the thin and light MacBooks, they might actually switch to ARM processor, because Apple is so confident in their performance that they think that it can now match Intel in that thermal envelope. Amazing. Like, look at from 2010 or 2011, whenever Apple actually started making their processors, from that time to now, in the space of 9 years, less than 10 years, look at how much improvement they have made, how much performance improvement they have accomplished. And then look at what these idiots have done, the Qualcomm morons. First they used their abusive monopoly to get rid of the competition, so Intel dropped out, Texas Instrument dropped out, and seems like Samsung is also throwing in the towel. Nobody is left, and this is what happens when you have just one competitor. This is what happens. This is what happened in the desktop and the data center also, right? Intel became lazy and they were not doing anything. So finally we have AMD coming strong and giving a competition to Intel, and which is good now because there is competition, so we will see improvements. Now Intel is going to come out with some kick-ass CPUs down the line. They are going to come back very, very hard on AMD, right? Which is a good thing, which is exactly what you want, right? Whether you are an Intel fan or whether you are an AMD fan, you want competition, right? Because if Intel does not come strong, like if Intel does not come back with a very strong line of CPUs for data center and for clients world, then AMD will become lazy, right? The same thing will happen again. So we don't want that to happen. Unfortunately, in the mobile world, it's a shit show right now. I'm very disappointed in the Android space because Apple is not going to give their hardware to other makers. So the Apple chip, that is fantastic, but Apple is not going to share it with anybody else, and so all you are left with is Qualcomm. And Qualcomm is really, they have really dropped the ball. The latest line of SoCs that they have made, which is mandating 5G modem, and I think it's not even integrated 5G modem, so you have to get two SoCs and you have to put that in your phone. That makes it very power hungry. It takes up a lot of space. That's one of the reasons why Galaxy S20 Ultra, that phone, is so big. It's so big because the SoC is so huge that you need to have a huge battery and a lot of space inside the phone. When you lay out the the motherboard, you need all that space. You can't make a 4-inch phone using the Snapdragon latest SoC. It's just so power efficient. It's so power hungry, and it's also such a large die, and it sucks. I don't know who will compete with Qualcomm, right? It's a sad state of affairs is all I'm trying to say. Now I read somewhere that Google was trying to make their own SoC, and if that is true, I think that would be great. If Google is working on a ARM chip, right, if they have taken the ARM design and the architecture, and if they are trying to optimize it and come out with their own custom implementation of an ARM chip, just like what Apple has done, I think that would be a fantastic news. So I don't know how far they are along and if they are even working on that or not, because this was just a rumor that I read somewhere. But if that's the case, that would be awesome, because Google has very bright engineers who work for the company. So if these guys are actually working on customizing the ARM architecture and coming out with a a SoC for their Pixel line of phones, that would be a fantastic news. So yeah guys, so I think I just wanted to talk about the state of affairs when it comes to smartphones, and how awesome it is for the iPhone people now that they have a $400 flagship phone choice, which we Android people, we don't have that choice anymore. And this is an upside down, the world is upside down, and this is a bizarre world we are in. It's really, I would have never thought this would happen, that Apple would come out with a flagship $400 phone, and the Android people, we would not have anything remotely close to that. So it sucks, but what can we do, right? That's the way it is. Anyway guys, let me know what your thoughts are, whether you prefer iPhones or whether you prefer Android. And if you are an iPhone, if you have been living in the iPhone world, what are your thoughts on the $400 iPhone SE? And if you are in the Android world, then what do you think about this phone? And how do you feel about the mid-tier phone market that is in North America, right? What do you think? Are you satisfied with the choices you have, or you think that we are being taken for a ride by these companies? Let me know your thoughts guys, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.